Hey guys, Triple T Cat here, recording for the Zombie Arcade, bringing you another Kerbal Space Program tutorial video. And in today's video, we are going to be doing a moon landing, which is a little bit more complicated than what we did last time, just the moon flyby / orbiting. And I'm going to show you guys how to land on moon. So before we actually get into the piloting aspect, we'll do a quick overview of the rocket design. This is, again, one of my older designs. It's not actually that great, but it will be adequate for our purposes today and leave you more room to be creative yourselves. So we've basically got sort of a boosting thing going on here, more boosters. This part is much like the assembly in the last video, except instead of solid-state boosters, I'm just using more liquid fuel rockets because it works a bit better. And then this command structure is a little bit different. We've got a ladder, some landing struts, and a manned command module, not the robot one. But otherwise, this is pretty much the same as the last time. It's a pretty basic design, but it will get us to the moon. Not back, however. I have yet to do a moon mission where I've actually returned with my crew. For that reason, if you don't want to leave your Kerbals stranded on the moon for the rest of their lives, you may consider just sending like an unmanned probe, maybe shove some wheels on there, that kind of thing. That design becomes a little bit more complex because if you want to be able to drive around and have wheels and stuff, just the design for that becomes a little bit more complicated if you're going to do an unmanned rover kind of thing. So I'm just going to show you this thing here, which is a manned mission. And of course the beginning of this procedure is going to be much the same as the last video. I'm just going to put myself in a nice orbit of Kerbal, although I'm going to do it the other direction this time, if you will, thanks to a comment a user made on the last video. What I was doing before was not super efficient. And I'm just kind of going to assume you've already seen the first video, or you at least kind of know how to get yourself into orbit around Kerbal. If you don't, go check out the first video, because I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. In this one, we're just kind of going to put ourselves up there. Okay. Now that we're in a somewhat round orbit around Kerbal, with our engines dethrusted, course, and just chilling, we are going to, as in the last video, just add ourselves a maneuver in order to get to the moon. If we aim about 45 degrees ahead of where the moon is, we should have a good encounter, and I believe this will work nicely. And we're just gonna use as little fuel as we can to sort of get this good encounter. So only a burn of 28 seconds, which is good. And once again, now that we've added this maneuver, and again, if you need more details on how to do this stuff, check out the last video, because I'm also going to focus on covering the things that I didn't cover in the last video in this one, if that makes kind of sense. Now just going to accelerate time for about 24 minutes until we get around to where we're going to need to perform this maneuver. Oh yeah, we should probably put ourselves on the correct heading first. Often a good step to take at this stage. Alright. And let us now blaze it. This rocket design, we're probably going to run out of... Actually, we may have enough fuel on this phase. And, again, we're just, not just going off what the reading down here says. We're going to keep an eye on the map and make sure our trajectory is actually going to be kind of what we want it to be. It doesn't matter if it's not exactly matching up with these, with the projected trajectory that, the maneuver thought we would have. As long as we do have this moon encounter, we are in excellent shape. And that looks pretty good. Pretty close to what we were meant to achieve. So again, as last time for our moon flyby, at this point there's not much to do aside from accelerate time until we get up to this encounter. Okay, so here we are. We have encountered the moon, and we're going to escape it shortly if we don't do something to stop the horror. What we want to do, of course, is actually land on the surface of the moon And to do that, basically all we need to do is slow ourselves down until, we're going to fall to the surface of the moon naturally. And we want to take into account one other thing, which is we want to try and land on the side of the moon that is lit up, because it's a little bit harder to land if you can't see what's going on, and also it's not as exciting to explore the moon if you can't see what's going on. So we're going to take a look at our trajectory here and pick a point on it that would be, if there was a straight line between our trajectory and the surface of the moon, would be above a lit area. So something like this is going to work just fine. And we're going to add a retrograde, so that's the circle with the cross through it and the three things sticking out. We're going to add a retrograde burn there until, our trajectory looks something like this. In fact, the specifics of how this ends up looking is not particularly important, because when we do get to that point, I'm actually mostly going to do this manually. I just want to make sure that I have this maneuver somewhere where I'm going to land on a good spot. In terms of actually getting rid of my speed so that I land, that's something I'm going to kind of do by ear to a certain extent once I have gotten to that point, which is in about 56 minutes. So once again, I'm just going to accelerate time. Hello there, moon! Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove this maneuver now. I no longer really need to see this. I can see that I am above an area of the moon that is lit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to burn retrograde, so again towards the circle with the cross through it. And I'm going to burn at 2/3 throttle. And I'm just going to keep burning until my speed here gets down close to 0. Basically, I want to get this actually as close to 0 as possible, and the reason for that is that if I can get my speed down quite near 0, then I should come in towards the surface of the moon at a sort of a 90-degree angle to the surface, instead of coming in at a angle where I'm moving quite quickly, sort of side to side in relation to the ground, which makes it a bit harder to land. You basically just want to be going straight down towards the surface, and once I drop all my speed up here, I should fall pretty much straight towards the moon. I will take the moment to point out here, I haven't looked up any guides or anything on how to do this. I am not a physicist. It's entirely possible my strat for actual landings at the moment is pretty bad in some way. I'm quite open to that possibility. In fact, I'd say probability. But it will work. I think in many respects that's the most important thing. Now, as your speed gets low, you're going to need to keep adjusting your course so it gets prograde. And when it flips out like that, that's when you cut your thrusters. You'll see my velocity is 2.5 meters a second, which is not ideal, but it'll do. So what we're going to do now is face the nose of our craft towards the sky on the nav ball, so just away from the surface of the moon. And we're going to not actually be using any more map view for the rest of this flight, surprisingly, perhaps. But we're going to actually do this with our eyes and senses shut. So I'm going to accelerate time as we fall towards the moon here. Let's go to about 100 times speed. And we're just going to sit here until our altitude above the surface of the moon is around 30,000 meters, and then I'm going to go back to real time and start slowing us down, because obviously we're going to accelerate towards the moon now because of its gravity. We're probably going to get to about 500 or 600 meters a second, and if you happen to strike a hard surface at 500 or 600 meters a second, generally speaking, your spacecraft is actually going to explode. That might come as a surprise to some of you if you haven't been paying attention so far, but if you wish to land without exploding, we're going to need to slow ourselves down pretty considerably before we actually hit the surface. But we don't need to worry about that until we're quite a bit closer, because we should be able to slow ourselves down quite quickly. So slow ourselves, our time warp down here under 100k, and just let ourselves continue falling until we are at about 30,000 meters. And at this point, you'll see we're going about 700 meters a second. I'm just going to throttle the craft up, again, to about 2/3 throttle. In fact, I'm going to go with full throttle for a while here, just to make sure we slow down in time. And I'm just going to keep slowing it down and watching our velocity here and getting that nice and low so that when we do hit the surface of the moon, we do not detonate. You may be looking at this and going, oh, I'm falling quite slowly. The surface of the moon is still pretty far away at this point. You are not falling slowly. Trust your little gauge here, not your eyes, or you will detonate. And unless you want to detonate, you should probably try and avoid detonating. I think that probably goes without saying. And you'll see I'm still adjusting my course so that I'm burning retrograde, not straight up. And the reason for that is I still want to get rid of any sort of lateral momentum we have where we're going across the surface versus straight down. So I got my speed down to, pretty fucking low. It was down to about 19, 20 meters a second. And I cut thrusters, and I'm just going to let myself fall a bit closer now. At this point, though, you do want to make sure you keep your velocity pretty low, because if you speed up too much, you're going to have a hard time slowing yourself down enough to not explode before you do actually hit the surface. I've been thinking about this, and I'm assuming you can leave it later than 30,000 meters to start burning, at least in this craft, because, because of the fact here that I'm cutting my thrusters completely again, But this is the way I found to do it right now, which has turned out to be pretty successful, and I rarely explode anymore landing on the surface of the moon. So I'm just showing you guys something that I know works. This probably uses more fuel than is necessary, though. I'm probably being a bit overly conservative, something along those lines. But what we're gonna do now is we're basically just gonna feather our throttle and go to quite low level of throttle each time, and make sure we keep our speed nice and low as we fall towards the surface of the moon here. And this is, the way I'm doing this, there's no sort of hard line formula. It's kind of finicky, but you kind of get the hang of it, and you just want to keep this number here nice and low, and make sure you don't waste all your fuel while you're still far away from the surface. Like, I could just burn up a lot more fuel now, but there's not much point, and I might not have enough when I get closer to slow myself down and actually land. So if you just keep it on my throttle gauge, you can see what I'm doing with my throttle, which is I'm just kind of increasing it, decreasing it. I'm just trying to get myself so that I'm slowing down, but not slowing down particularly quickly at this stage. Keeping my fuel up. I'm getting quite close now. You'll see, you might be tempted to just use your altimeter to figure out, when you're going to land, but keep in mind that that's relative to the sea level, not the actual surface. And the sea level on the moon apparently is quite far below the surface, so you can't really rely on that too much. If you do, because you can sort of see here, I'm going to hit the ground, and this will probably still read maybe 2,500, 3,000, something like that. Not 0. So you can't rely on this gauge to tell you, how far away from the ground you are. And we're just going to let ourselves fall a little bit closer here. It'll give you a vague idea, but as you start to get closer, you want to make sure... Whoops! Setting myself away from the surface there a little bit. As you start to get closer, you just want to actually use your eyes. Alright. Coming in nice and close here. We still have a little bit of sideways momentum, but not too much. And feathering the throttle, as you guys can see. A little bit too much throttle there. And we have now successfully landed without detonating. So that's how you land on the moon. As you can see, I don't have like a hardline scientific method for this one. It's something you kind of got to do by feel. And as you can probably tell by my remaining fuel, this craft is not going to now be able to escape from the moon and return to Kerbal. If you want to do that, you're going to need something a little bit more complicated. However, using this method I have showed you today, you can reach the moon with a manned mission and then proceed to walk around on its lovely surface. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Trouble T Cat. You have seen today how to moon, and until next time, Trouble T Cat flying through space.